Welcome to That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey.
And I'm Ron Shaw.
And we started this podcast to discuss the good, bad, and ugly of project managing, bring humor to our everyday project management and client situations, and a place to commiserate on all those things that our partners, friends who aren't in the industry never understand. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey. Of course, along with me is Ron Shaw. Ron, it's Friday. We're recording this on a Friday.
Yes, it is. And Fridays are the wonderful day of the week because you're wrapping up again and everything ready, hopefully for a fun weekend, or at least a relaxing weekend.
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else, but this week was terrible. But the good thing is it's not 90 degrees outside anymore. It's cold. It's awesome. So I hope everybody is ready for that. Yes.
We've officially entered Han Solo season.
Yes. Well, where you are, it's going to be like tourist season, right? Because everybody wants to see the fall foliage.
Yeah. This is when we're slowly getting there. The leaves have just started to slowly yellow out a little bit, but within the next 3 weeks, that's when we get peepers where people come from city areas that don't have a lot of trees to be like, look, colorful trees.
Yes, my father-in-law actually just did that 2 weeks ago. They were in New Hampshire, and we asked them what they did, and they said they were looking at the foliage. So they said it was beautiful, though. So I'm glad people are still taking the time to go do things like that, because I try to appreciate the foliage, and Georgette just throws on the ground. So she's not impressed with the color changing or the fall foliage. Hopefully pumpkins or something will get her more into.
Oh, yeah. Those could be more exciting.
Season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So today we're talking about, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback on this because we're not going to touch upon everything that happens when this happens, but we want to talk about attack of the teams or Slack chat, whatever IM service that your company, your agency use, a contractor use, because I think we've all been victims and also guilty parties of trying to communicate something over a team or a Slack. And you need to pick up the phone. I think that's happened to both of us. We've probably done it to each other. But if we did, I'm sure we picked up the phone because it happens really frequently and we get it. Everybody's trying to have these quick solutions to things. IMs are the way to go because people have them everywhere on their phone, on their computer. It gives you a notification that you got one and it doesn't go away in some instances until you click it off. So Ron, I want to ask you, A, have you been a victim of this? And B, have you also been guilty of this?
Guilty on both charges. Yeah, I've been in the position where I've had those before. Where I'm looking at it going, why is this coming through? Is the chat messaging versus a conversation, or even it could be an email as well. It really depends. We can dive more into this, but I think it really depends on what is being communicated and thinking about, is this the right medium to be communicating with?
Right. I'm guilty on both fronts as well. I will play the victim card. I think I'm more of a victim in this situation than I am guilty of doing it. I'm typically the one that will be like, can you just call me? Because I don't understand what you're telling me. Also because probably in let's say the new heightened anxiety that everybody has been feeling, I've actually been reading a lot of articles about anxiety. It makes me feel like I missed something or kind of like an idiot if I literally can't figure out what you're talking about. It happened to me this yesterday. So, and I finally figured it out. I didn't need a phone call, but that does not mean don't pick up the phone. So I feel like you have to, because it takes more time to keep going back and forth through this conversation than to just pick up the phone really quick and tell you what I'm talking about. So I think a lot of people are starting to figure that out. Although on the other side of that, we get a lot of people who say, I don't like to be on the phone. Totally get it. I don't really like it either, but we have to have a happy medium and there has to be a way to figure that out. So when we're talking about that, and a lot of the time, it's probably a little bit different for independent contractors too, because those clients have to feel like they can get a hold of you anytime they need to, especially if you've told them you have flexible hours or you have special hours. Let's say they need to feel like they can just get you, especially if they have a question. So when it comes to the conversation of asking somebody to pick up the phone, it's kind of like those people that will text you and then you call them back and they don't answer. My mom is guilty of it, and she will not mind me sharing that because she doesn't know where to find podcasts on her phone. So there's no chance that she's going to hear me say that. But it's such it shouldn't be an awkward conversation, because if you're really trying to get to the root of a problem, you should have no issue with somebody wanting to call you to figure it out. So how do you feel about that? Do you just in the moment tell people to call you, or are you always like, hey, listen, just call me on the phone if we can't communicate correctly?
Yeah, or I will just do the call out to them, because
Yeah.
it's a matter of how much time like you said, how much time it's taking to actually communicate what needs to be communicated, and looking at that, am I spending a lot of time just trying to decipher what's being said? Because sometimes the way we think and the way we type to try and explain it doesn't work out, because we may not hit the right words or answer the right questions that someone might have for clarification.
Yeah.
And be it work with the chat messaging or personal life with text, I don't like being inundated. I don't mind there's certain
Mhm.
times where I'm having a conversation with someone, and that's fine for me to go back and forth. I don't mind that. But when it's about something that I need to complete or deliver upon, I don't like any ambiguity of trying to figure out what did you actually mean by that. If it's unclear to me and I've asked for clarification in a chat message and I'm not getting the clarity that I need, it needs to go either to a phone call, or I need a little bit more of a detailed explanation in an email. Um,
Mhm.
that's just the way personally that I can process it better. I will automatically, if I am that at the point where I'm not stuck, I try not to call people without warning them first, but sometimes it's
Yeah.
just like, okay, this has got to get resolved like right now. And let's just get on a call, and I will reach out and call them first. If I don't get a response, then I'll follow up with a message like, hey, we need to chat about this. We need to talk about this. Or can you just give me a bit better of a breakdown through email?
Yeah. Cause it's also, the other part of that is I love when somebody will team you something, asking you a direct question and you answer it. And you do put in, I've done this before where I'm like, yeah, I sent it. Why? And then they don't respond. And you're like, why? It's almost like when you wait for those three dots to pop up on a text. And so it's funny like that, because you're obviously asking me for a reason and then you stop answering me. What are you doing? Like, it drives me crazy. So that's also where I feel like it gets kind of misinterpreted and also confusing of why are you asking. I typically, if I send somebody a question, I'll tell them why I'm asking.
Mhm.
That way there's no kind of weirdness between us of why I'm asking, especially if it's maybe been a project that I'm not too familiar with, but they've brought me in to kind of help or answer questions. And then I'm questioning the person who's running it. And they're like, why are you now asking me questions about this? So to me, it's more of a comfortability factor for everybody, just making sure you know why I'm asking, why I'm doing it on Teams. I just need a quick response. So I really try to take in my own comfortability and feelings into when I get teams like that and when I'm sending them. Because we talked about this before. I think we talked about it on the last podcast. Slack, Teams, whatever IM service it is, it's used for kind of brief, short communication,
Right.
quick. Whereas email is the more lengthy. Here are the steps I need you to take, have it completed by blah, blah, blah. Because can we all just be honest in the safe space? When we send an email with a due date, we're sending it to cover our own butt. Everybody knows it. You want to be able to pull it back up and be like, yep, that's what I said. Whereas in a Teams channel, I am not going to go search in a Teams channel to see where it is. And
Yeah.
also, you could be like some of those shady people out there who are like, oh, I didn't get your text or your team. Yes, you did. The little eyeballs right there. I can see it. So I feel like where you're sending email, you're doing it of more of a tracking system, whereas Teams, you just need a quick, brief response.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yep.
would agree. And again, for me, when it comes to the use, it again, it's choosing the right medium for the type of content or messaging you're delivering. So for me, the Slack, Teams, that chat based communication is for a quick one-two thing. It should not be used in the case of here's what I need you to do. For me, like if there's an assignment or a task or something that needs to be completed, that is better suited for email because it allows the person to save, reference back. Emails are easier to search. I mean, yes, there are search tools in the chat platforms, but they do not work as well as an email search.
They don't work at all. Like it's, and I won't say that as anything against any platform. It's just, it's the worst experience to have to go search for that.
Yeah. And it's using the right tool for the right job. I mean, that really is, I think, what it boils down to there. And we've got to get kind of to a place where we're just letting people know, like, hey, this isn't going to go any further, rather than trying to continually ask more questions to get clarification. It's having that self-awareness to know, like, I'm not going to get what I need through this medium. So let's switch over to one or the other, either a call or an email to try and get this worked out. Generally, in the case, if you're not understanding what's coming through in a chat text message, the phone call is probably the better option because the email may not be any clearer if you're not getting it from their writing. And also it allows you to get that immediate talking to them back and forth. And you know, the other thing I've noticed with this as well is you don't always know the emotion or what they're trying to say or how they're saying it, because sometimes when you read that, you're like, are they telling me I'm an asshole here?
Yeah.
When it really
somebody just replies, okay.
Different. Right. I mean, have you noticed stuff like that?
Completely. And I probably read into it more than the average person, which is probably not a great habit. I don't advise anyone to do that because typically I'll do this a lot with a colleague that I have, and it's never what they meant to say or how they meant to interpret it. I took it that way because I don't like being second guessed in questions, but I'll be honest, sometimes I need to be second guessed. I think we all do. So it's, I think we tend to interpret it differently, especially when it's outside of hours that we're used to working, because then everything's heightened. You think it's an emergency. If it's a question, you're thinking about what you did that day. Was it wrong? Did I send the wrong thing? So I think interpretation is also a problem because it's just, you get to where you're thinking about that. And I mean, it's almost like you're going to keep answering that team or that Slack until it's resolved. That could go into evening, nighttime hours. That's not healthy for anybody, especially if it's not an emergency. So I probably read into messages more than I should, especially if you guys are having some long drawn out conversation and then it just ends abruptly. And then I'm thinking we're still not on the same page and somebody is still mad. So interpretation I think is a big one too, because that way, if you call that person, they pick up, they're like, this is what I meant to say. A light bulb goes off and you guys are fine. So yeah, I think especially in our industry, working on projects, interpretation it's a big problem.
Yeah, and I think I've definitely been on both sides of that conversation before, where I know sometimes when I'm responding, I can sound snarky when I'm just trying to respond. It's just because when I text or message, I'm very matter of fact. Like it's just kind of direct to the point. I don't like to use more words than I have to send something in that. It's just kind of like, here, yes, thank you. And I will get to the point where I am one word responses. And I've been told before that can come off as harsh or snarky towards people. I'm like, it's just me. I'm very direct in my response. I don't need to use more words. But again, it goes back to being aware of the other person as well and making sure that they understand, which I think is just a problem in general with chat and text, is that there is no way to actually tell. I mean, emojis have helped a little bit because when you can add those in, be damned that these little cartoonish pictures have become a main way of communicating, but they do help in some effect too. If you say something and you have a smiley face versus a pissed off face emoji on there, you get the emotion that's behind that particular thing. Obviously also like all caps, which is just one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I despise. All caps is it should go away.
I think we should take a poll though on who thinks the thumbs up is a true thumbs up or if it's like a leave me alone. I
Oh,
got it.
got it. Thanks.
Like that's the one I think gets the most misinterpreted is it really a thumbs up? Like you're okay with it? Or is it like leave me
Yep,
alone?
thank you. And yeah, I mean, it can, especially like when you have a lot of messages, it's like, okay, understood. Okay, understood. And then it's
Mhm.
like, is it understood or is it just, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it goes back to it's interesting that you say that somebody has told you it sounds snarky or curt because with a former colleague, I had that conversation with her because she would always ask me if she sounded curt. And I was like, no, you were just telling me what to do. I got it. I don't need, and I mean, this isn't true for everybody, so I speak for myself. I don't need all the pleasantries and everything. In the morning, great. Tell me good morning. We'll talk about our weekends, whatever. But if you're trying to get something done quickly or you just need to tell me something, I'm okay with the
Right.
matter of fact, the direct, here's this for today. Great. Okay. Talk to you later. And it's interesting because I've been accused of being curt as well. But it's interesting because I didn't see it that way because it was during a really high pressure situation and I had extra people helping me and they would be like, what do I tell this person? And I would answer back really quickly. They saw that as curt, that I wasn't saying, hi, how are you? Okay. I'm trying to get something done. So again, it comes into interpretation and knowing how those people operate. Unfortunately, if you're trying to get something done quickly, if you have people that need the pleasantries and need the extra handholding, you've got to give it. Are you going to give it all the time? No, because you're probably going to forget because you're
Right.
just trying to get through something. But it's interesting that you say that because now I'm thinking there's probably a boatload of people that have probably been accused of being curt or just short when really they're just trying to get you the solution faster.
Yeah. And it's just kind of like, yes, I've responded to that was you asked the question, I gave an answer. If there was more of an explanation, you did let me know. One of the things that as we've been talking that I've been thinking about is also that the delay of responses sometimes. So let's say someone asks you a question and you have to ask a question back. And then all of a sudden there's a gap because maybe they're in meetings or whatever, but there's a gap of like all of a sudden 2 hours before the response comes. At that point, your brain has shifted. You're working on something else. Then there's another, maybe they have a question back to it. That's part of my issue with it. It's like,
right.
when you, or sometimes when, this is really the one that burns me. Someone sends a message, they ask you a question, and then if you have a follow-up or something, and you're like, as soon as the message comes, you follow it up, and then there's nothing, like,
right.
It just goes silent. Like, granted, they may have stepped into another thing, but I think you have to think sometimes about before you send the message, because if that person is going to respond right away, like if you do see that, be available to continue that conversation versus just like send the message and then you're off doing something else, because it really becomes disruptive. I'm like, okay, did I just piss you off because you're not responding to me now? Like,
Well, and
trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah. And I think it's also a little presumptuous and disrespectful in a way, because if you send me a team asking me a question, I immediately answer you. And then I don't hear from you 3 hours or for 3 hours, I'm not going to sit at my desk waiting for you to reply. I'm going to go do something else. And then if you come back and need this solution 4 hours later, you're not my priority anymore.
Right.
Like I was trying to help you and which we all get distracted. I get it. We have a million projects going on, things in our personal life, whatever. But like you're saying, if you're going to do that and I'm going to use my time to help you, then make sure that you're going to close the loop on the conversation in a timely fashion.
I mean, for me, it's almost like it is that on that same level as you call a person, you're talking to them on the phone, but they're also talking to someone else in the room with them at the same time. Drives me nuts. It's like, who are you talking to? And you keep trying to figure out who they're talking to. It's on that level, not exactly the same thing, but on that level for me of how much it can irk me when those types of things happen.
Yeah, I think my household is guilty of that. My husband actually tries to join the conversation and I'm like, no, this person doesn't want like random feedback in the background of the conversation we're actually trying to have. So, and it might just be a product of the quick moving environments we're in. and everybody wanting to help and everybody having expertise in things and thinking that they can add to the conversation. It just creates more noise. So it's like we always say, it's progression, but at the same time, we're kind of going backwards because we're not solving all the issues we need to. But it's also, I mean, I feel like, I don't want to say in the last couple of years, recently, we've had more awareness around working environments, empathy, making sure everybody feels included. So I think now we have to take a bigger stock of how those messages are coming across. Whereas before, we would kind of just send them and not have a second thought to how you would interpret what I'm saying. So I think it goes deeper than just trying to have those quick conversations. But now I even have found myself before going back and being like, oh, did that sound really bossy? And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't mean to. And I think I've actually sent you one before this. It was like, I did not mean to sound like a brat. And you being the nice guy that you are, were like, I didn't take it that way. So I think now I hate that it's created kind of this sense of second guessing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it in emails too. I've definitely gone back to an email and been like, ugh, like that was really just short and didn't ask you any questions. But now it's become this bigger thing, right? Than just sending an IM. It's like, ugh. But with the power of Teams, you can delete it. I haven't used Slack in a couple of years. But I mean, the delete button is great, but so is the edit, because I've definitely noticed where I've sent something that didn't make any sense, or that was missing a lot of details in the question I was asking.
I've had that edit button is my best friend at times, because I type fast, and a lot of times I'm trying to have my fingers keep up with my brain processing the words and getting them out. And then I'll hit send and I look back at it and go, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And everybody looking at it is going to go, what the hell are you saying?
Yeah.
So having that ability to go back and edit your message is great, because you can revise, and typos are my best friends. Having that opportunity, because instead of, I can't stand adding more onto it, like star. This is
I had to do that 3 times this week. And I was like, never mind. Don't read my message. I'll just send a brand new one. I was like, you're never going to figure out where all my asterisks were supposed to go. Which, like you said, is when you're typing quickly on your phone, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And then with the deleted messages, though, like when you're on the receiving end of that, and then you look and see something deleted, you're sitting there going, what the hell was in that message? I got to delete it, especially if it's like a late at night one, and all of a sudden you're like, what was there?
Yeah. You reminded me, I actually deleted one this morning to a colleague that I probably need to go back and be like, this was not urgent. It was just something I already did. The deleting on the receiving end. Yes, it's true. You're like, oh, okay. And so you're definitely wondering what they put, but typically mine is like, if I already did something, or if I asked you for help and I just already went and did it, I'm going to delete it. Especially if I know you didn't see it, I'm just going to get rid of it. And especially if you ever, which I will say I was guilty of this, if you ever send it to the wrong group, you delete it.
Well, I think that presents a whole different level of complexity, as well as having the group messaging, because that can become overwhelming to some degree, because you're not only trying to clearly communicate with multiple people, and then if everybody's responding, like I know business chats don't typically move as fast as like you would see it in an event or something like that, but they can move, and everybody's flying ideas, and sometimes you're trying to break it up so you're not writing this whole long piece in there. Maybe you have to send it over 1 or 2 messages, and then people are already responding before you can finish what you were saying.
Right.
That can definitely be interesting. And back to what you're saying about having to think about how people feel now versus one, you're thinking about an entire group. How is this entire group going to process and take this message in? So I think that can be challenging. And also it's a matter of, are the right people in this conversation? Because, I see where people will just sometimes invite everyone, and it's like, do I really need to be a part of this? And I ask myself that sometimes when I get invited into group chats, and I'm like, what's the topic here, and do I need to be a part of it? Am I actually going to provide useful information to this group?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when, and some people take it personally when they see that you left the conversation, but like you're saying, if I'm no longer needed in here, for one, I'm going to mute it because it goes off
Right.
every single day and I don't need to see it. And it goes back to people's time, like thinking about people's time. And if they're looking at these chats and then they realize they have nothing to do with them, I just wasted, some time reading through that to see what it was and realizing it had nothing to do with me. So I completely agree with that. Let's talk about using IM or direct messaging to give edits or feedback on something. Because I will tell you, I'm the first person to admit I'll ask for feedback. I probably need to start doing it in emails because I'm the first person to lose things in a chat. I don't remember where they are. I forget that we were chatting about that. And then you just have to go back, and if anybody knows, and if anybody's done this, and don't say that you haven't, because I know you have, because I do it all the time, where you're working on an email draft or something with someone and you copy and paste it, and then you put it into your Outlook or your Gmail, and all the formatting's weird. It just doesn't help anybody. So what are your thoughts around doing feedback and things like that through direct messaging?
If it is a one and done type of thing, like if it's not going to be a whole chain, I don't mind it. However, if it is a larger series of feedback, like let's say a document or something like that, it's better to keep it directly in a document versus having it just be a bunch of lines of text. And I think, some of the stuff we've seen, at least over the last few years, is the teams have gotten good about kind of calling each other and saying, hey, where do you want the feedback before doing it? Because we've all had those where we stepped on and somebody provided it, and then it gets to your point, it gets lost in especially if it's an active chat with a consistent running one, it's going to get lost in there, and you don't necessarily have that reminder. And if you get pulled away right after you've asked that, you may not even see some of the feedback because it's just gone right up the chain of the chat. So personally for me, I again, if it's one quick response on something and it's one person, I'm okay with it being there in the chat. But I also know when I do that, I need to take immediate action to write it down somewhere or make that change that to the feedback I've asked for right away. Otherwise it will get lost.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because it comes along with also asking for feedback in there, because I've done that before with a team where not necessarily everybody checks their direct messages. They like email, but this person likes direct messages and not email. So it gets a little bit tricky with that. It goes back to what we talk about knowing people's communication preferences, because it sucks to put in something in a direct message for feedback and no one responds. So you either think it's perfect or no one read it. And then they tell you, I don't check my Teams or Slack or whatever it is a lot. I didn't see it. So then that also setting back your timeline, because then they're going to want to go look at it. And you've let 3 days go by without any response. So it's so interesting how we have this pattern in every episode so far of just now another thing on top of harnessing all your skills. You're also having to manage these communication preferences, and you might get teams where you have to do it in both. You have to give it in direct message and email. Does it suck? Completely. But if you know that going in, at least like on your mental checklist, Audible checklist for some of us, that you're going to have to do both. And it's just a part of that process. But it's interesting. I'm not saying it's gotten harder for project managers, because luckily, I don't know what it was like in the early 80s, 90s, and before that for project managers and event managers, but it's definitely gotten to where you have to have that awareness. I think that's going to be my word today, is just awareness of how everybody prefers to get their communication and what's going to be the most efficient way of getting that.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's really what it does. It is that awareness of communication. And while I can't stand when I get two channels of the same message, it drives me. I'm like, oh my God, pick one. But knowing why, I understand why, but it's still one of those ones that just drives me crazy. It's like, why am I seeing this in two places?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
especially when they come back to back. But when you're sending them, that's what you have to do. It's like, okay, for this group of people, I've got to put it in a chat message. So they, in this group, I've got to send it an email so they get it. But just put everybody on there anyways. Instead of
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
separate that group out, it's kind of an annoyance. And again, it's one of those where it works to meet with the groups or the teams and kind of set expectations ahead of time of like,
Mhm.
this is how they will go. Is everybody on board with this versus having to split? Because that, it might be a microsecond extra time to do that extra step, but it's still over the long run, it consumes time versus having one channel that everybody agrees upon. Is that this is where the messaging will come from. You need to take personal responsibility and make sure
Mhm.
you are checking that particular channel for messages. I don't think there's that is a big ask for people is to have that conversation and say, okay, here's what we agree, here's where everything's going to be. Now you just have to take that step to go in and look at it. It's not
Yeah.
like it's really hard to look at Teams or Slack. You click on it and go, okay, messages, okay, done. Like if there's
Mhm.
action, great. Again, that also goes back to using the right medium, because if you're asking people to do stuff versus conversation, that's probably better off as an email.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that also goes back to the whole, what I said I was guilty of asking people in a chat if they can chat. Tell them why you want to chat. Don't just ask that. Because I mean, a smart aleck person can go back to you and be like, isn't that what we're doing right now? And so that again just goes back to it's about preferences. Like you said, it's not the most efficient thing. But if you ask them at the beginning, or you could be bold and just say, this is how I'm going to send it. I
Right.
mean, I guess it depends on the personalities you're working with, but you could easily just be like, this is how it's going to go, and set that up in your process doc and your project plan. That way there's really no room for options. They're going with what you say. So, and if anybody does that, let us know, because I want to know how well received it is, because that's great. If it is received by all the clients you work with, I would love to know, because I'm going to try that the next time I
Yeah,
go
that'd
into a project.
be great to hear how other people look at that. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think varying on preferences for people and generational too. I think there
Mhm.
may be. I'm making a hypothesis, but I think there may be some generational preferences based on kind of what you've gotten used to in your time in the working world. Like I think
Mhm.
maybe I am, because I'm late Gen X, early millennial, so it's kind of like how I look at it. I kind of like the email more. It's because that was primary when I first started working. That's what I got so used to, is you work through
Mhm.
email. Whereas the
Yeah.
younger generation, they may be better at going and doing all of this in chat. So I'd be interested for people to respond as they're listening to us. Let us know, one, what generation are you from? And do you think that has an effect, or do you have a preference
Mhm.
on how to communicate?
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely an email person too, just because I can sit there and absorb it. Whereas if I'm on the phone with you or in a team, I'm gonna have to be jotting down notes for myself. Whereas if I read your email, I get it, I can get started. If I don't get it, then I can follow up and ask you. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see that, because we do want to do a topic in the future about it might be kind of a debate style. We haven't decided yet, on just the generations in the workplace. The industry, for one, our events industry has a span of generations in it. So
Right.
it's so interesting to hear the different takes on it and what works. And if it didn't work, how you got it to work for everybody. So I would love to hear that too, because if we knew, we could probably do some research on it and really help, more independent planners or project managers when you're going into a client that you're not necessarily familiar with, and how you can approach that.
Excellent. Well, I think we are running towards the end of our program. Leslie, do you have any final thoughts for this week?
Message with caution. I think, take that time to just do a double check of what you're sending, how it sounds, and if it's got details in it, because that's going to keep you from having that back and forth or having to hop on the phone if you don't want to, if it's got details in it and why you're asking. What
Excellent. I
about
think
you?
I think for me, the final would be to make sure you are using the right medium for the right type of messaging. I cannot explain that enough. Like it's critical. It really is to think about, am I using the right medium to deliver?
Yeah. Oh. And if it ends up in 3 new questions, pick up the phone.
Exactly. All right. Well, we are wrapped up for this week. Again, if you like the show, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, you can follow. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now we've expanded into TikTok. So you can follow us there. We'll be doing little clips from the show from time to time on there. Until then, thanks. We'll see you next week.
Hey, everybody.